Hi, I'm Lisa Niven Kelly. Thanks for stopping by today for the Fleur De Link class. Now this chain got its name because the links look like a fleur de lis, but since they're links, we named it Fleur De Link. And we are going to power out an about 18 to 19 inch chain, so you get a lot of practice in perfecting this link. It can be a little challenging, that's why we've marked it as an advanced class. So we're going to make the entire chain and some earrings. I really recommend though that you practice first, make at least like 6 to 8 links out of copper because it can be so challenging. You don't want the learning curve to happen in the sterling. So with all our classes, we really recommend you watch the entire class through just so you can see the flow of things and then get started working with your pliers and your wire. So I'm going to show you how to perfect the links, and then towards the end of class I'm going to show you different chain variations where we're going to change the size gauge wire, the size of the link, incorporate more beads, and so forth. Cool? All right, let's get started. Here are some of the tools we're going to be using for today. A chain nose plier. I just have my little crystal there to identify that it's mine, but this is a Lindstrom chain nose. It's very strong. It has a nice pointed tip up here, which is why I really prefer it. It's very strong out at the tip as well. So it's great for manipulating thick wires, and I like the ergonomic handle. But you just need a nice chain nose, no teeth inside. A flush cutter. This is the Tronix razor flush cutter. Any flush cutter will do really. Just make sure you have a pointed tip here that's sharp and not dull, because we're going to be needing to get into tight spaces and do some snipping. A round nose. I prefer the long round nose because of this section of the jaw. I use this a lot. It's a little thicker than the typical short round nose, so I can make big loops back here. If you have a short round nose, don't worry, we're going to be able to use that today, and I'll show you how to adapt for that. Other than that, you need a ruler and a few other optional tools, which I'll show you now. Here are some optional tools that you might want to have around for this project, but again, they're optional. I'll show you how to work without them. But let's see, for this chain, let me just hold up the chain here so you can see. This outside loop here, I like it pretty wide. You can definitely make it more narrow, and we'll talk about that. But to make it this wide, that size does not exist on my round nose. So I'm going to need to use something round that's bigger to make that. So sometimes I just bend it right around a pen. But I also use my wrap and tap. This is a medium wrap and tap plier, and we sell these in the shop. They're basically just a stepped round nose, but they have really large diameters here to make big loops. There's a size even bigger as well, but for this project I use this medium step here, and I also use a smaller one, smaller medium depending on my chain, to make the jump rings. So they're kind of handy, but again, if you don't have them, don't worry, you can just use a pen. And then for the bench block and plastic mallet, in the chain here, again, on this loop, since we're using 20 gauge, sometimes it can be a little bit weak out here. So we're going to be hardening it, and I'll go over this later. But basically, we're just going to hold it on the bench block and hammer it with the plastic mallet a bunch of times to harden it up. Again, we'll go over that later. But that's why you might want to have a plastic or rawhide mallet and a bench block. Here are the materials that you're going to need to make the Fleur De Link necklace and earrings. Up here we've got 20 gauge sterling silver dead soft round wire, 15 feet. This is 16 gauge sterling silver dead soft round wire. We need about 14 inches, and that's for making the jump rings that connect it. The 20 gauge is going to be used to make the Fleur De Link sections. And this is just a nice centerpiece bead. I've used here a large Swarovski crystal bead. So these things here are the things you need to make the necklace. Over here are the things you need to make the earrings. We need 6.5 inch to 2 inch head pins. These are the bald head pins. They're made out of 24 gauge. We've got 6 3mm Swarovski crystal and 6 4mm Swarovski crystal that match your centerpiece bead, and a pair of ear wires. So these components over here will make up your earrings, as well as one of the a foot that is in here. So you don't need an additional foot to the 15 feet. I've included it in the 15 feet. This is enough to make the necklace and the earrings. The only thing that you would need in addition to this is copper wire to practice with. So I really, really recommend practicing this link in 20 gauge copper wire before moving into your sterling. So start out with about 4 feet of the copper wire. We're first going to get started with the triple split rings, and those are here on the chain. You see this little guy here? It's like a split ring, but a split ring comes around twice. And a split ring is like on a keychain, you know, that double around. If you've never seen a split ring before, that might help you figure out what it is. You can see this one is triple. And I just use it because it's a little stronger, it's a nice look, and it really holds these links together. So the ones that we're going to make have about a 4 millimeter inner diameter. I'll show you how to mark that on your tool. If you made them a little smaller, it would bring the links closer together like this. Or if you made that inner diameter larger, they'd be further apart. I like this distance. I think it makes the chain flow really nicely. So that's what I've made here, and that's what I'm going to show you how to make. I start by cutting about 1 foot off of my roll of 20 gauge. So this is my 20 gauge sterling, and it's 1 foot. Now on my round nose, I'm going to build these triple split rings right about here. You can measure it with a millimeter gauge or with a ruler. You want to find a spot that's about 4 millimeters thick. And I need to make sure when I'm making these and rolling them that I stay on that spot of my tool. So if you need to get a Sharpie pen and mark it, go for it. It will come off over time, but it's good for now. If you want to mark both sides, that's fine. And that will help you stay on the same size of your tool so that your triple split rings don't change in diameter in the inside of them. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with a flush cut. Using the flush side of my cutters, I'm going to come here and just cut the smallest bit off to make sure that I'm beginning with a nice flat cut. Now with my round nose, I'm going to put the wire in at that spot, right there. And this starts out just like making a basic loop. You want to make sure the wire's not poking out, but right there. Okay? So I always roll away from me as I feed it on. Loosen your grips, squeeze, continue. This is just like making a basic loop. Now, when the tail comes around, make sure it comes around to the outside towards the tip of the tool. So see the tail here? It's come around next to the wire and it's on this side. So this way, if I just keep feeding this wire on as I turn, I'm about to show you, this will just grow off of the tool. If I have it come around to this side, the only option is to have it build this way, and we're going to make kind of a cone shaped. So right here, I'm just going to keep turning, and I'm feeding that wire on the black line, making sure I'm staying there. It's come around 3 times now. See that? So I'm going to stop, come back in with my cutter, and using the flush side, wait, here we go, here, I'm going to snip it, leaving me with this guy. So let's do that again. Start with a flush cut on my round nose, on my black line. I'm going to roll, having the tip, and I kind of have to shift my plier a little bit like this to force the tip to come around, and continue keeping the wire on the black line until it comes around 3 times. I go a little bit further like that so that when I cut this last one, everything is flush and lined up. Okay, we'll make a couple of those. So let's go ahead and do this one more time. I just want to show you a couple of problem-solving things. So just like normal, I've already started a flush cut. I'm going to hold it within my round nose and begin my rotations. Now with the round nose, you don't want to squeeze too hard. You just want to hold it lightly enough that it will grab the wire and rotate it. For this link here, I'm going to purposefully squeeze too hard. Now when people are learning a new technique, they oftentimes will squeeze really, really hard. So right there, now I'm going to come in and cut it. So let me get nice and close here. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but from squeezing too hard, I've marred this wire. Let's see if we can get even closer. I don't know if you can see the little dents right along there. Like right there, there's a big one. See right in there? Anyway, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but trust me, there are little dents and mars in the wire along here where I squeezed really, really hard with my round nose. So just lighten up on your grip and just squeeze hard enough that you can actually grasp it and move it. So everybody's going to make a necklace chain different sizes. I would say to make about at least 10 of these triple split rings. And remember, you really want to try to get them tight close together. You don't want any gaps between the coils of the ring, or it just doesn't have the nice look that you achieve by having them tight. Just want to mention too, another way to do this is to find a 4mm dowel or mandrel and just form a big long coil around it. And you can learn how to coil by hand in our freebie on coiling by hand. And if you form a big coil, you can then separate them out and cut them up into these triple splits. For some reason, I find it quicker and easier and a little more consistent to just bang them out on my plier rather than building a big coil and separating it out. But you can play with that too as well. All right, now we're going to move on to making the jump rings. I just want to show you what role the jump rings play in this chain. You can see they link together through the spirals. They link together the two Fleur De Links here. And you need to determine how big to make those jump rings. Sometimes people's spirals come out a little bit bigger than mine. Maybe you made a larger inner loop in the spiral, so you might need a slightly larger jump ring. So the way I figure that out is I take my ruler, and it's upside down because I'm using the millimeter size of it, and I'll take two, let's use this as an example, two Fleur De Links, and just pretend like, okay, I want them about this far apart. I don't want them to overlap, and I don't want them way far apart because then I'd need a huge jump ring, but about this far apart, and line it up to your ruler and try to figure out what the measurement is between those two holes in the spirals, between this hole here and the other hole. See what I'm saying? So that way you can figure out what the inner diameter of your jump ring needs to be. And in this case, it looks like about 5 millimeters. You can also use a sliding millimeter gauge if you have one of these. We sell these in the shop. They're quite handy, but just line up your little guys like that and take this and sort of figure out, be like about like that is the size between the two insides of the hole. So you can look closely up here and see that this is the line you need to measure with, and it lines up with 5 millimeters. So I would need a 5 millimeter inner diameter there. Sorry if the reflection's kind of confusing the camera, but right there. So there's two different ways to determine how to measure it. And now I'm going to show you how to make them and cut it up. So now that I've figured out that I need to make jump rings that are about 5 millimeter in the inner diameter, I need to find something to wind the wire around that's 5 millimeters thick. This pen that I use for the loops is a little bit big. If I measure it with my millimeter gauge, I can see that it's about 8. So that's going to make an 8 millimeter inner diameter jump ring, and that's going to just separate my links apart a little bit too wide. it's not going to flow with the design. And again, as jump rings are bigger, they become weaker, so I don't want it to be too big. On my medium wrap and taps here, I know that this little guy right here is 5 millimeters, so that'll work great. If you don't have the medium wrap and taps, you need to find something. Cruise around your household, find something that's about 5 millimeters thick, maybe a knitting needle or a section on your round nose pliers or something like that. But for our purposes here, we're going to be using this guy, and we're going to use the 5 millimeter tip. All right, so I'm going to start with my 16 gauge. Let me just straighten it out a little bit here. Again, with a flush cut, just cut the smallest bit off as possible. Now, just a quick note about cutters. When you're doing that, just cutting a little bit off of the wire, don't use the tip of your cutters, because you want to preserve that tip. Keep it as sharp as possible for as long as possible. So I cut a little bit further back in the blade, back towards the box joint there, so that I preserve my nice, shiny, sharp tip. Okay, so coming in with the wrap and taps now, I'm going to form a big coil that I'm then going to cut up into jump rings. So I'm going to start on this step, and these guys, you use them just like a round nose plier, and you start out just like you would to make a basic loop. So I'm going to be rolling away from myself, and I'm going to let the tip of the wire come around and towards the tip of the plier, just like I did with the triple split rings. That way I can form a big coil that will just start to grow off of this plier. Then I'll show you how to properly cut it up. So holding right here, flush, not poking out, but right there, I'm going to begin by just rolling away from myself, loosen my grip, bring it back, continue, let that tip come around towards the tip of the plier, just like that, and then just continue. And you'll see this grow. Now this is 16 gauge, so it takes a little bit of effort. You can see my thumbnail turning right there, white, because I'm really pushing the wire hard against the tool. I don't want to be out here like this and kind of let it come around wimpy. Let's be real strong with that to really get some nice round loops. You're probably going to need about 10 jump rings, so make a big coil. You can see now my coil has almost reached the end of the plier, but because we let the tip come around towards the tip, it just grows right off the edge, and we can continue. Again, your other option would be to find something that's 5 millimeters and build a coil by hand around it. If you need a refresher on coiling by hand, check out our freebie on Beaducation, the coiling by hand. It's going to be a little tough though, I'll warn you, because 16 gauge is some thick stuff. Even that kind of caused a little stress on my hand. That's enough for now, so I'm going to stop now and show you how to cut them up, but make sure your coil is nice and tight. So I'm going to show you here the quickest and easiest way to make jump rings. In my opinion, it's not really the best way to make jump rings. For this project, it's fine because we only need 10. But if you needed a lot of jump rings, it really makes more sense to cut them with a saw because they'll be more regular and they'll have a nicer cut. We do have a class online on making your own jump rings. It's taught by Lisa Claxton, and it's really, really thorough if you wanted to learn more about that. But for here, since we just need about 10 or so, we're just going to cut them up with our cutters. And we need a really, really flush cutter. Otherwise, your cuts will be pointed and your jump rings will not be strong. So pay attention now as we're cutting to the flush side of your cutter. This is the flush side. Although this is a razor flush cutter, which means that the blades are razor sharp and will cut super flush, if I'm cutting with this side of the cutter, it will be beveled. So if I were to take this cutter and say cut this tail here and cut right here, this side will cut off pointed because that was facing the beveled part, and this side will cut off flush. So you really need to pay attention to that while cutting up your rings. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my flush side of my cutter, and where I started out my coil here, it was a little funky, so I'm going to trim it off. I'm going to flip my cutters so that they are facing the part that I'm keeping. That's this part over here, and this tail is going to come off a little pointed. Also pay attention to how your blades are lined up against the wire. Even though you're using the flush part of your cutter, if you cut at an angle, it's going to come off pointed. So make sure that they are nice, and basically the jaws will be perpendicular to the wire that's coming in. I'm going to give it a nice cut right there. So there's my first flush cut. Flip my cutters and cut the next coil as close to the cut on the first one without cutting the first one again. And you've noticed I've flipped my cutters, so now my flush side is facing this coil here. And so boop, there's my first ring. Let's cut that again. Now I need to flip my cutters back and cut the smallest bit possible off of here. Because of the way it was cut previously, it's left with a bevel. So snip, flip them, cut the next coil as close to the first cut as possible without cutting it again. And there's my next ring. One more, flip, cut that, flip my cutters, cut the next one. Also pay attention that you don't put your cutters in too far where you're accidentally cutting not only this wire, but the next wire right there. See a nice cut. Let's just do one more. Trim a little bit off, flip it, and trim the next guy. Okay, so go ahead and cut up at least 10 of those. Okay, let's get started making the Fleur De Link double unit sections. So for this, the Fleur De Link takes 2 pieces of 3-inch cut wire. So I just start by cutting a bunch of 3-inch pieces of my 20 gauge so I can kind of kick into production mode. And have your triple split rings nearby because you have to insert them before the final wrap on the link. So what we're going to start by doing here are these sections here. This is what I mean by the double link section. We'll connect them with the jump ring later, but right now we're going to make this link. Before beginning this next step, if you need a refresher course on making spirals out of wire, I recommend stopping here and viewing our free class on making the wire spiral, because we're going to be doing a lot of spirals here, and I'll just be briefly demoing it as I make the links. But to perfect it, if you don't know how to make a closed loop spiral, etc., you might want to go in and refresh with that course. The first step in making this link is we're going to take 2 3-inch pieces of our 20 gauge. We're going to take one of them and form it into this loop here, right there. Like I said in the very beginning, you can use something like a pen. This is about 8 millimeters in thickness. I'll show you how to use this. Okay, so you want to hold the pen dead center on the wire because this is 3 inches. That would be at about the 1.5 inch mark. And then let the wires come around, watching them as they come around to make sure that they come up evenly. See that? Now I've formed a nice loop there, but what I do here is I turn it to this angle and kind of pinch it like that so that it's coming around and then the 2 wires are coming together. Use your fingernail if you have to. Let me take it off of there so you can see what I've created here. So this is the loop that I'm concerned with, and then I've sort of pinched them together here because there's going to be a wrap there. And don't worry if it doesn't come out completely angled like that. Really just get this for now. And then with your other wire coming in with your chain nose, you want to form a right angle dead center. So I just kind of fake it because it doesn't have to be exact, but if you need to measure it right at 1.5 inches from here in, that's fine. And just form a right angle there. Okay, so now comes the trickiest part of this chain. I'm going to take my looped over one. Before wrapping, and I repeat, before wrapping, put on a triple split ring. If you don't do that, you're kind of going to be bummed because you can't put the triple split on afterwards. It just spreads it out too much. So put it on before wrapping it. If you goof up and you make one like this, sorry, where you didn't put it on, just put it aside because you can use this for the earrings later. So you have a couple of get out of jail free cards there. All right, I've got my triple split on. I'm going to pick up my right angle wire. I'm going to hold it right here about a 1/2 inch from the end of the loop to where I'm going to wrap. And I'm going to need to hold this still with my chain nose. So I flip it over because I'm more comfortable holding my chain nose with my left hand and wrapping with my right. Okay, here's the tricky part. So I'm going to try to get those 3 all together and hold it still with my chain nose. But the key is here, you want all 3 of these wires to be close and snug like that. And you may have a hard time holding it with your chain nose. So to get a good grasp, shift your hand back on your handle to get some good leverage there. And scoot them all in. Now this is about right. You want your chain nose just a couple millimeters away from the right angle in this wire here. The reason is because when I start to wrap, I'm going to wrap this direction. So I'm going to be coming towards my chain nose with my first wrap. But if my chain nose are too far away from this, these wires will just twist rather than staying flat and allowing this one to just come over, under, over, and under. And you'll see as we begin here. Okay, so I tend to have this wire up on top, so my first motion is going to be around. If you have a hard time holding this with your hands, then get another chain nose or perhaps a flat nose to hold here. But I'm just going to use my hand, making sure everybody's snug, and begin this wrap here. See, it slipped there. Let it come around nice and tight, but don't pull so tight that you end up twisting the 3. And then if this guy keeps shifting, don't worry too much about it because your wire can grab him. You see that? No, because my hand was in the way. It can grab it and pull it up right there. And get that wrap. See the direction that I went? I went towards the plier. Now my plier's in the way, so I need to shift it down a little bit. But don't think you're all tricky by starting way back here because those wires will not stay flat. They'll all 3 twist. So you need to be pretty close. I'm going to do 3 wraps here. Here's number 2. And here's my 3rd one. Right there. I'm going to stop now. So this is going to end up being the back where you see the end of the 2 tails, and this will be the front. So I'm going to start here. Get my cutter and trim right there. Actually, I want my flush side facing there so it's not all pointy. Okay. Now this wrap here, keep in mind, is the end of this long wire here, right? So it can slide up and down. We're going to want it up here as tight as possible before we spiral out the other wires, and that will keep it in its place. Once you spiral out the other wires, if you have it out here, it's going to stay there. So make sure you do some adjustment first, right here. Now with these 3 wires, I'm going to spread them out so that I can work on them. You can kind of see where I'm headed here. These 2 are going to be spiraled in with a closed loop spiral. This one's going to be spiraled in with an open loop spiral because it's going to be the center one that's going to have a jump ring coming between it. Before spiraling all these guys up, make sure that these 2 are even. If they're not, just come in and trim it a little bit. This guy looks a little bit longer. Plus you do want a flush cut at the end of either one. And then make sure the center one is 1 inch. All right, if you leave that center one any longer, the spiral is going to get pretty big. You'll need a bigger jump ring to connect them, and the whole chain will be weaker that way. So let's just make sure that's 1 inch. Okay, these two guys are going to get spiraled up with a closed loop spiral, so no loop in the center. And I'm just going to go over it quickly. Again, if you need an intense refresher on it, check out the free class on spiraling wire. Start with my chain nose. Grab the tip of the wire with the tip of my tool, pushing real hard here to make sure I get it nice and tight. I'm going to bring it around to about there. That's where I stop. Now here's the trick with the closed loop spiral. I'm going to come in and pinch that guy. Notice the angle I'm holding it here. I'm holding it like this so that I'm tucking that tip of the wire rather than flat like this. Right here, and squeeze, tucks it in, so now I have a little kink. I'm going to use that as the base of my spiral and spiral around it. Now remember when spiraling not to squeeze too hard with your chain nose, otherwise you'll mar up your wire. Just enough that it holds it to rotate it. Okay? Same thing on the other side. Grabbing just the tip, coming around nice and tight, and then squeezing in here to form a nice little kink. Spiral around that. And normally with a spiral, I'd come in with the wire with my thumb over here and push it that way, but because I can't, I'm holding the whole piece and really pushing it tight against there. So there's my two little pigtails there. Now this guy I've already cut at 1 inch. If you forgot to do that now. And I look at the top here, meaning the back is where you see the two ends of the tails of the wraps. This is the top. And I'm going to come in and grab this wire with my chain nose as low as possible and kink it to the side. Even push it with my hand if I need to. Now when I spiral up, the spiral will sit centered. Now this spiral, I need a loop in the center of it, a loop big enough to accommodate a 16 gauge jump ring. So I'm going to use just the tip of my long round nose. If you're using a short round nose, you need to come down away from the tip a little bit to make it big enough. Don't make it too big. Just right about 2 millimeters thick, maybe 1 millimeter in the inside. However thick a 16 gauge is. So right here, just like making a basic loop, roll away from me. Excuse me, I've got a little fuzz there. Continue. And that's where I turn it up at this point. And let it come around really loose so that I can then tuck it. By doing that, you'll get it nice and round rather than egg-shaped. Traditionally, you'll make a P and then let the wire just come right up on it and start to overlap on top of itself, not next to itself. But that sometimes gives you an egg shape. So that little tuck I just did is kind of key to keep it round. And we'll just continue that spiral. Because I already kinked it, as I complete the spiral, it'll just tuck right in the middle there. Okay. Now we're going to do another one, not forgetting before wrapping the link to put it through this triple split ring. All right, I'm ready to make my other half now. It's going to link into this triple split. And for this one, I'll show you how to use the wrap and tap if you do have these to make that first loop. So we'll put one aside. The wrap and tap, we're going to hold it on the second step. Make sure it's centered, which it obviously is not there. Okay. Now these wires are going to come around and watch them. Now I'm going to show you a trick. Do you see how this wire is coming around much longer than this one? So if I continue to pull them together, this guy would be shorter. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to pull this one out a little bit and only move this one. What that will do is eat length from this one, and hopefully they'll come around together like that. Still a little bit off, but that's okay. That's fine. Now remember that little movement of pinching them together here just to start that angle there. Okay. So there we go. Now with my other 3-inch piece and my chain nose, I'm going to hold it in the center and give it a right angle. Now, before wrapping it, insert it into its partner's triple split. But before adding the wrap, you need to take a look at where you are here. Now this is the back of this link. And because when I add the wrap, I put it on top. Let's get it in here. And then wrap it. This is also going to be the back. So make sure before you put it on and you wrap it, you're looking at the back. Do you see why this is the back over here? You see my two tails come around. That way you'll have both the wraps on the back and you can build your whole chain that way. Truth be told, if you had a couple of links that had it flipped, one was a back, one was a front, you're really not going to see it. But if you want to pay attention to that, now's the time to make that adjustment. So I've put this guy on the back and now I'm going to go ahead and wrap it. And before wrapping, make sure that they sort of look the same. And they do to me. You want to make sure that you're not wrapping like way down here, or this loop came out much bigger than this one. Because even if they vary a little bit on your chain, as long as the ones that are linked together look the same, then you really won't notice. Okay, so holding nice and firmly here, I'm now going to wrap this. This first wrap, I almost kind of pull the wire over and then push it this way because I need it to come around and wrap towards the chain nose. Right there. Okay. I'm going to shift my pliers down a little bit to continue my wrap. There's two. Shift them just a teeny bit so I have space, but not too much. And 3. Again, that gets a little hard at the end there. If you need to use another chain nose or flat nose to hold this and manipulate it that way, that's fine. So now I'm done with the chain nose. I'm going to come in with the flush side of my cutter and trim. Okay, did you notice that that was not the flush side of my cutter? That's the flush side of my cutter. Let's trim that again because I noticed it wouldn't cut nicely and it came off pointed. There we go. All right, so next we're going to spiral up the ends. You might be tempted to come in at this point right here where you just cut and kind of flatten down and burnish down that last bit, which is fine, but just keep in mind you need to do this final adjustment before doing that. Because if you're going to come down and right here squeeze down that tail, you're going to kind of set everything permanently. So make sure everything's exactly where you want it. Next step, again, spread these out a little bit. These two are obviously a little bit different length, so I'm going to give this guy a little trim, give him a flush cut, trim the longer one at 1 inch, and go ahead and spiral everybody up. All right, I went ahead and spiraled up those two little outside guys, and now it's time to spiral this one up. Just want to point out that what I like to do is have my outside spiral here and my outside spiral here sort of be opposite of each other rather than like kind of facing the same way. So where over here I kinked it that way to spiral it up, this one I'm going to go the opposite over here. It's actually the same way I did it that time. So with every link that I make, I kink that guy down as if I'm looking at the top. And if you look closely here, I did do that on this one. I kinked it down when looking at the top. So then they sort of flow nicely. So let's go ahead and spiral up this. I'm going to start with my round nose, just the tip, to make a small inside loop. Roll away from me, keep going. This is a point where I shift and look at it this way, come around super loosely, and tuck, making it nice and round. Then with my chain nose, finishing the spiral. not holding too tight so that I mar it. And now we've got our completed section. So now we'll do it one more time. We'll make the spiral link that attaches on this side. We'll try to do it nice and close up so you can really see the process. So again, we're starting here with our 2 pieces of 3-inch 20 gauge wire. The first one gets bent into a U. Right there. Cool. The next one gets bent into a right angle, dead center. Okay. So now I'm going to bring the other one back in, but first attach it to this guy. And I'm now looking at the back. You see the 2 tails over here? So I'm going to start this wrap by putting it on top rather than underneath, on top. That way, both sides will have their tails on what I refer to as the back. Coming in with my chain nose and getting a nice tight grip there. And just shift my hand. All right, let's start the wrap. Up and over. So really think of this as a wrap, not as twisting them all together, because then, like I said before, these 3 will just completely twist. We want this to just wrap around the flat 3 wires. There's my second wrap, and I need to scoot it down a little bit to get my third right there. I'm also going to show you a little bit of problem solving on this close-up shot here. First, we're going to come in and cut though, right here. Okay, so if I flip it back over, I notice my wraps are not nice and tight, which I would prefer that they are. So I'm going to come in with my chain nose and give them a little squeeze here. Tighten it up. And again, remember that here, this guy moves, so scoot him all the way up before spiraling up the ends. And what I worry about here as far as the distance, like am I going to wrap back here? Am I going to wrap way up here? So I'm really concerned about these 2 matching. All your links may not match on the necklace, but at least try to get the pairs, the partners here to match. So that looks pretty good to me. Let's spread these out now and spiral them up. You don't really need to see a close-up for the spiral. I just mainly wanted to be this close so you could see the wraps. Before we leave this nice close-up view, I actually do want to give you another review on that center spiral. So I've spiraled up the little outside guys here. Now I'm going to do the center one. Let's start with that kink. And now moving to the round nose, I'm going to come out on the tip here. Roll away from you, loosen your grip, bring it back, squeeze, continue, and now I kind of shift so I can see it like this. I let it come around really wide. I'm rolling and shifting, and then tuck. Did you see that little tuck there? It's what makes the inside of this spiral nice and round rather than teardrop shaped. Then moving into my chain nose to continue the spiral. And it'll come up and sit nice and centered. Just one more thing before we are done with these links here. This isn't completely required, but I recommend it. What I'm going to do is hammer these loops here with a nylon mallet or a rawhide mallet, I'm going to take it here, and this is the part here that I'm concerned about. Because this is 20 gauge, it can be a little bit soft, and if you really pinched here, you could smoosh it. So let's come in. I like to use a nylon plastic mallet. It will not change the shape of the wire, it will only harden it. So lots of little taps here. See, it's not affecting it. And that'll harden that up to help it keep its shape. And flip it over and do its partner here. Again, this isn't completely required if you don't have a bench block and a mallet, don't worry about it, but it sure does add a nice little extra bit of strength. So once you've kicked into production mode here, you should have 8 links of the double Fleur De Link units here. 2, the ones that are going to be in the centerpiece here. So this is just a Fleur De Link unit with a split ring on it, a triple split, and nothing else. You need 2 of those. That'll go right in the center, and you'll see how. And then your 11 jump rings that you just cut. So now let's move forward and make the pendant and the clasp. Before we put it all together, let's make the centerpiece pendant here. Now, if you bought the kit from us, we've provided in the kit this large Swarovski crystal bead, and we're just going to make a little spiral head pin and wrap the top and dangle it from the middle. Okay, so as you saw just now, this bead will have a spiral underneath it and a wrapped loop on top to be connected as the pendant. Now, I'd love to tell you how much wire it takes to make that, but it's all really going to depend on your bead, and I don't know how much it's going to take for this specific bead. So instead of just giving you the number, I'm going to show you how I figure it out. I've started with about 5 inches of wire here, and to me that's too much. So after making this pendant, I'll see how much I have left, and then you will know how long to cut it. So let's get started. I'm going to make the little spiral at the bottom. Start with my little kink and pinch it in. Now base my spiral around that. Another design element though, is that you might want your spiral a little bit bigger than mine. So that's obviously going to take up a little more wire. So I do about 2 rotations, that looks good to me. And then I'm going to come in here and kink it way out to the side, so that now as I continue to spiral, it will sit dead center, and there's my spiral head pin. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my bead on and do a wrapped loop at the top here. Again, we don't go into depth on this because it is a prerequisite for this class. Make sure you make a decent size loop here, one that's about, I don't know what that is, maybe 6 millimeter inner diameter. Turns out it was nice to have this wire a little bit long because I can just hold it with my hand rather than needing another tool. Cut that little tail and then I'll burnish it down. Give it a little squeeze. Be real careful here though that you do not hit your crystal because it will crack it. And I come in and just sort of straighten everybody up. The last component that needs to be made before linking all together is the clasp. So if you did make 1 spiral link there without putting your triple split on, now is the time to use it, because see, we've used it here in the clasp as the eye for the hook and eye. So I'm going to show you right now how to make this guy. And then here's the one that you forgot to put your triple split on. So let's talk about the hook. I really like this clasp really for any design. Let's start now with a 4-inch piece of wire. So before, where you had 2 3-inch pieces of wire, we're going to have 1 3-inch piece, 1 4-inch piece. We're going to start with the 4-inch piece. This would be the one where we'd first make the large loop, but instead we're going to start with the tip of your chain nose and hold that dead center, because we end up with a little bit of a kink there rather than a loop. So I'm going to hold that dead center and pull the 2 ends together. Okay, I'm a little bit off there, but I know that I have a little bit of excess, so that should be fine. And I just leave it like that. Maybe pinch it in a little bit so it's a little more even. Now measure here 1 inch before wrapping in the other wire, and mark it with a Sharpie if you need to. So right here, I'm just going to put 1 little dot, which will get covered up, or you can rub it off later. There's my inch. Now I'm going to come in with this guy and put him at a right angle, and we're going to do things just like we did earlier, to get it all wrapped up. So now just pretend this is your big U'd over guy, and we're just going to place this right on top at that inch mark and do the wrap from here. Shift a little bit. And there's my 3rd wrap. I'm going to come in with the tip of my cutter, cut that. Now for this one, because this isn't largely looped out like our other links, this guy can really shift up and down. So what you want to do once you have it set is come in with your chain nose and take that last loop, the last wrap, and really pinch it down to sort of bind it there so it doesn't shift. Want to remember, keep this at 1 inch. Now things are sort of normal from here. I'm going to trim this guy. This was my longer one, so he more matches this one. That's fine. Just like before, trim this at 1 inch. Spiral these out, spiral these out, spiral this guy out. Okay, so I've spiraled up all those ends. Now I'm going to bring in my round nose and hold it dead center at a spot on my round nose that's about 4 to 5 millimeters in thickness. And I'm going to bring these 2 ends up. Now when you do this, I'm going to be making the hook here. Keep in mind this is going to be the top, because the hook is going to come over this way. So I want to be looking at the top that is not showing the 2 tails. Bring them up together, and you'll see you've got your hook there. Now because this is a tapered round nose, one of these loops is slightly bigger than the other, so I'm just going to shift it over and kind of push it up my round nose a little bit, using it almost like an awl to get it to thicken out that one loop so that they're even. The only other thing I do here is, if you need to pinch these in, if they got really wide, go ahead and do that. Then grab the last little tip here and kink it up just a little bit for a hook. And then your other side is already made. There's your hook and eye. Now remember, always with the hook and eye, they're pretty dangerous if you leave it really open like that. So I pinch it in pretty tight, so that you can kind of feel it clicking in and out for safety reasons. All right, now let's link it all together. Now you've completed all the components you need to put the chain together, including the pendant and the clasp. So let's start linking it all together. To put this all together, we're going to use the jump rings that we made in the beginning. So you can see this one is linked together by the jump jump ring right there, running through the 2 spirals. The chain behind it still needs a jump ring right there, and right there. So let me show you how to connect those up. Let's start in the very middle of the chain with the pendant, and we're going to be opening and closing a bunch of jump rings now, which we made out of 16 gauge wire. So you might want to grab a second pair of chain nose or a flat nose, because opening and closing these with your fingers is a little tough, and you don't want to use your round nose, otherwise it'll mar it up. So let's start with this jump ring here. I'm going to hold it on one side with my chain nose, and coming in with a flat nose, I'm going to grab it and open it up, and then insert first one of these, then my pendant, then another one of these. Let them scoot down a little bit so I can still get a good grasp on my jump ring, and then rock it closed, letting the ends sort of scrape together for a nice tight close. So far we've got that. Okay, now coming in with another jump ring. Let's insert one side of a spiral, grab another link, insert the other spiral, keeping in mind that I'm having the tops face up. I don't want the tails showing. So I'm going to flip it this way, insert it on there. Butterfingers today. And then coming in with my 2 tools again, closing that jump ring. So far so good. Let's come in with another jump ring. I think you kind of got the feel for it, and you can link it up from here, but let me just do one more, opening it only a little bit out to the side, and insert one link there. Let's bring in another one and get him going right there. And now coming in with my flat nose and closing it, letting those 2 ends scrape together for a nice tight close, kind of rocking them back and forth. So far here we are. Okay, so who caught my boo-boo here? You get bonus points if you did. This guy right here is on backwards, which is going to make me crazy. So let's see, I'm going to have to flip him by opening this jump ring and that jump ring, flip him over and reinsert it. Then he'll be facing the right way. So here's my finished necklace. I've linked it all together, including up here at the hook and eye clasp. And mine came out to about 19 inches. So if you wanted to make yours a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, you need to vary the size of your links. Or in the very back, if you need to, I would just, instead of putting a double unit here, see, by adding another full link, you add another 2 inches here and 2 inches here. So what you can do is take one of these links here and only have it with one side. So you essentially take this link out and have your spiral link and jump ring connect straight over to an open loop on another one. It would change the pattern just a tiny bit, but that would be fine if you just had it in the very back. That's how to shrink it down, you know, if you wanted to take off 2 inches, not a complete 4 inches. Let's move on here to making the earrings. There's just a couple of changes when making the earrings. The basic makeup of the wire wraps and such are the same as far as the construction. The only change is here we don't need to put on a triple split ring, and in here we cannot do a closed loop spiral on the outside little ponytail spirals, because we need to have an opening to link our 24 gauge head pin loops there through. So let me show you how to do that now. You already know how to get it to this step. I just didn't put a triple split ring on here. I've already put 2 flush cuts here and trimmed this to 1 inch. The only difference now is when spiraling up these two guys, I want to have an opening in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and use the very tip of my round nose. You can use your short round nose if you have it, but on the materials list I only required the long ones. So I want to make it happen with these guys. I'm going to use the smallest bit up here. That would be hard to do if I was working with a heavier gauge because they're not very strong out here, but they'll be okay with my 20 gauge. And just start by making your basic loop. Again, coming around here. And there's the, excuse me, tuck. Now moving to my chain nose and spiral that up. Now, one other thing here. These spirals need to come sit way up here. If they sit down a little bit lower like they did on your links, the thing that dangles from this guy is going to bump up into the one that dangles from the center. So really push it all the way up like that. Okay, let's do the other side. So bringing it around here and way up on the side. See the difference there? And now let's do the center. Just like we've done it in all the links. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to get out my beads and my head pins and put on some dangles. The next step here is to just wire wrap these head pins with the crystals on it right onto your earring component there. So, like I said, that's a prerequisite to this class, learning how to, or knowing how to do the wire wrap loop. But I'm just going to demo it one time here. The thing you need to remember is your loop is going to need to fit into this hole here on all three of these. So it might need to be a little bit bigger, the loop, than you're used to. So let's start that. Now I've made my loop. I need to just open it slightly, like opening a jump ring, just pull it out to the side and insert it into one of my spirals. Okay, now I'm going to shut it and hold it still as I wrap that tail. And my loop I've made here is about a 4 millimeter inner diameter. Now this wrap came out with about 4 wraps, which is fine, but I'm going to try to make sure that all the rest of them match. Now coming in with the tip of my cutters. What's nice about this cutter is it's very, very pointed, so I don't have to do a second step of coming in and squishing down that tail, which will maybe crack my crystal. So there's one. I just need to do the others. So here's the finished earring. I was a little tempted to make my own ear wires here with a spiral up here at the end to match down here, but then I really like the simplicity of this ear wire with a ball. It matches the ball at the end of the head pins here. So you can see that by scooting up my spirals way up to here, when these dangle, it doesn't butt right up against that. I mean, you can't really see it because it's laying flat, but trust me, when I had them down a little further, like the ones in our chain, it was kind of butting right up against that and it didn't hang right. So there they are. I wanted to show you a bunch of different designs here. So here they are all pictured together, but let's talk about them individually. Here are 2 different chains. The one over here, the shiny one, is the one we've been making in class here today out of the 20 gauge. Over here is the same technique, but it's made with 18 gauge wire. And you can see a couple differences. I've done 4 wraps here just to change it up and see what that would look like. The jump rings here are made out of 16 gauge, a little bit beefier there. And this though was made, like I said, 18 gauge and 2 3.5-inch pieces of wire rather than the 2 3-inch pieces of wire that we used over here. So just showing you a couple different things that you can do. You know, change it up a little bit, change the measurements of the wire, the thickness of the wire, and you'll get different looks. I also didn't make the looped over part right here as puffy as over here. That's a little more rounded. So it's just a different look worth talking about. This piece here is a bracelet, and it's made again with the 18 gauge, which actually is pretty hard for this wrapping part. That's why I've taught you in the 20 gauge. But I like this a lot. I've added in some wire wrap sections here where I've wire wrapped a loop to the inside of the spiral and then spiraled up the tail on top of a flat bead. I really like that look. And to be honest, I made this a long time ago, so I have no idea what the measurements were here. Maybe 2 4-inch pieces, because the links are quite a bit bigger than my other links. I've also hammered these. You can sort of see it on the screen there. And I've given the links a little bit of a curve. Can you see that there? So that when it lays on your wrist, it lays a little more fluid to your wrist, and it's not just a bunch of straight segments. The other thing I've done here is made the loop inside my eye of my clasp big enough to link the clasp, the hook, right on into there. That's kind of a nice thing too. So there you go. Here's a segment of chain I was just playing with this afternoon. I wanted to make a sample that's got some wire wrap links connecting them, and I made this chain out of 24 gauge. It was a little fine. I would maybe recommend giving it a try with 22 gauge. It came out so tiny. I really, really like it, but I'm worried about the strength. So out of 22 gauge would be great. What I did here was just 2 inches of the 2 wires that you end up wrapping together. And just as a frame of reference, so you can see how tiny it is, here's the one we made out of 20 gauge. So you can see those tiny little links. All right, so we're done. We've completed the entire necklace and the earrings. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really like this class because it's a little bit different the way we incorporate that second wire in the center spiral and the wrap. Remember though, with the wrapping of that center spiral, the other end of the wire, it's key to have a good grasp on the 3 wires while you pull it around and wrap it. Also, make sure you're not squeezing too hard on your spirals because you don't want to mar up your wire. And just have fun with it. Vary the gauges, incorporate beads in different ways, and I really hope you've enjoyed this.